My name is Elena. For the past 3 years, I have played the role of the invisible wife in the Harrison household. In the eyes of my mother-in-law, Victoria, I am nothing more than a lucky orphan who managed to snare her prized son Julian into a marriage she considers a disaster. To her, I am a parasite living off my husband's monthly salary. However, the reality I keep hidden is far grander than their petty prejudices. I am the sole owner of a global investment firm managing the assets of thousands. But I chose to stay in the shadows for one reason. I wanted to know if there was any sincere love behind the walls of this family ego. That afternoon, the atmosphere in the Harrisons' old living room felt suffocating. Victoria sat on her red velvet sofa, looking at me with a gaze that always made me feel like dust under her shoe. She had just slammed Julian's bank statement onto the table. According to her, Julian's balance had dropped too much this month, and naturally, I was the target of her accusations. She accused me of squandering her son's money on personal whims, when in reality, I was the one secretly paying off Julian's credit card debts every month to keep his reputation with the bank intact. I remained silent, listening to every insult she hurled. For me, this was the breaking point of my thinning patience. I had stayed this long because I loved Julian, or at least, I loved the man I used to know before he fell back into the influence of his status-hungry mother. But today, something was different. I had prepared a grand plan. I had just signed a lease for a luxury mansion in the most elite district, worth 400 billion rupiah. I used an alias through a third party to keep my true identity protected. Are you listening to me, Alana? Victoria's voice rose, snapping me out of my thoughts. My son works day and night, and you just sit here enjoying his hard work? If it weren't for our mercy, you would be begging on the streets by now. I took a deep breath and looked her straight in the eye. Usually I would look down, but not this time. I have a surprise for all of you, I said in a calm but firm voice. That sentence made Victoria pause for a moment, her face a mix of confusion and disgust. Right at that moment, Julian walked in with his younger sister Chloe. Chloe was a younger version of Victoria, whose life revolved entirely around social media and the craving for elitist validation. She walked in carrying several shopping bags from luxury brands, which I knew exactly were bought using the secret funds I had transferred from my account to Julian's earlier that morning. What's going on? Why is the tension so high? Julian asked as he took off his jacket. He looked tired, but his eyes still showed an insatiable ambition. Your wife just spoke about a surprise, Julian. Who knows what else she's planning to squeeze more money out of us? Victoria replied with a heavy, cynical tone. I stood up from the worn-out wooden chair. I walked to the table and pulled out a silver envelope from my simple work bag. Inside was a physical key with a crystal keychain and a gold digital access card. I placed them in front of the three of them. They looked at each other, skeptical of what they were seeing. I have bought a new house for all of us, I said without exaggeration. A mansion in the Green Hills, with high-level security and facilities you've only ever seen in movies. I want us to start a new chapter as a whole family, without having to argue about living costs in this old house. Chloe burst into laughter instantly. A new house? With what money, Alana? From selling those amateur paintings of yours? Don't boast. It's probably just some noisy terrace house on the outskirts of town. Julian also looked doubtful. He stared at the key and then at me. Alana, don't do anything stupid. If you took out a bank loan without my permission, I won't help you pay it back. I gave a thin smile, the kind that didn't reach my eyes. The house is paid in full, no debt, no installments. Tomorrow morning, a limousine will pick you up here to see it for yourselves. If you don't like it, I will leave and never bother you again. But if you do like it, we will live there together. Victoria took the key hesitantly. She flipped the crystal keychain back and forth, looking for signs that it was cheap. However, the weight and quality of the crystal couldn't lie. Doubt began to grow on her face, but her high pride kept her from believing it immediately. She didn't know that this was the beginning of a very expensive social experiment. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay beside Julian, who was fast asleep, thinking about what would happen tomorrow. I rented that 400 billion rupiah mansion not because I needed validation, but because I wanted to see their true faces when they felt they were at the top of the world. I wanted to know, when they have everything, will they still consider me one of them, or will they throw me away because they feel I'm no longer on their level? I had prepared this scenario meticulously. I wanted to test Julian's loyalty and Harrison's kindness. If they became better people after living in abundance, then I would reveal the secret of my true wealth and make them a part of my life forever. However, if greed won, I had already prepared the most painful exit for them. Tomorrow morning, the masks will begin to crack. Tomorrow morning, I will take them to a palace made of glass, where every move they make will be monitored by my plan. My name is Alana, and this is the final game I play to save my dignity as a woman they have stepped on for far too long. I will not let them know that the house is merely a stage, until the time comes for me to drop the curtain and leave them in the darkness they created for themselves. That morning, the atmosphere at the breakfast table felt entirely different. Victoria, Julian, and Chloe were already dressed in their finest attire, though their faces still mirrored a deep sense of doubt. A long black limousine actually pulled up in front of the old Harrison family home at exactly 9 in the morning. A driver in a crisp uniform stepped out and opened the door for us with immense politeness. I watched as Victoria's eyes widened at the sheer luxury of the vehicle. She climbed in hesitantly, brushing her hand against the smooth leather seats, while Chloe was busy recording videos to upload to her social media with an incredibly arrogant caption about her new life. The journey toward the elite hillside district took about 30 minutes. Along the way, no one spoke. Julian kept staring at me with a scrutinizing gaze, as if he were trying to solve a massive puzzle regarding how his wife, the one he had looked down upon for so long, could gain access to facilities like this. I simply stared out the window, watching the city skyline fade away as we entered an area marked by giant gates and heavy security. When the limousine stopped in front of a black iron gate with gold engravings, the driver tapped the access card I had provided the night before. The gate opened slowly, revealing a private driveway lined with perfectly manicured pine trees. At the end of that path stood a magnificent building with modern architecture dominated by glass and white marble. The mansion stood proudly atop the hill, facing directly toward the harbor and the city skyline. "This is impossible," Chloe whispered as she stepped out of the car. She nearly dropped her phone seeing the grandeur of the house before her. This mansion had a staggering rental value due to its absurd facilities. There was an infinity pool that seemed to merge with the sea, a private tennis court, and a garage that could house 10 luxury cars. Victoria stood frozen in front of the 4-meter-high solid teak main door. She didn't dare touch the handle until I stepped forward and used my fingerprint to unlock the automatic system. As the door opened, the cool air from the central climate control greeted us. The scent of expensive room perfume wafted through, giving the impression that this place was reserved only for those at the highest echelons of society. The main living room had ceilings 10 meters high with crystal chandeliers dangling elegantly. Victoria began to walk around the room, touching every piece of furniture with her fingertips, as if to ensure it was all real and not just a dream. "Alana, how could you possibly afford a place like this?" Julian's voice trembled. There was a mixture of pride and insecurity in his tone. As a man who always wanted to be the leader of the family, seeing his wife provide a mansion worth 400 billion rupiah certainly shook his ego. I turned to him and gave the answer I had rehearsed. "I've made smart investments over the last few years, Julian." I never mentioned it because I wanted to make sure everything succeeded first. And now, this house is proof that my hard work has paid off. Victoria suddenly approached me and took my hand. This was the first time in 3 years she had touched me without a look of disgust. "Alana, dear, I knew you were a bright daughter-in-law. I always believed you had great potential. This house is truly extraordinary." It is a palace fit for the Harrison family. I only smiled inwardly at how drastically her tone had changed. It is amazing how easily wealth can alter someone's perception. Yesterday, I was a parasite. Today I was the brilliant, beloved daughter-in-law. Chloe had already started running upstairs to pick which room she would occupy. She screamed with joy when she found a bedroom with a balcony facing directly toward the sunset. I took them on a tour through every corner of the mansion. We passed a kitchen with state-of-the-art appliances, a private cinema room with reclining leather seats, and an underground wine cellar with perfectly maintained temperatures. Every time we entered a new room, their admiration shifted into an increasingly visible greed. They began planning grand parties to invite their wealthy friends, just to show off that the Harrison family had returned to its glory days. However, amidst the excitement, I remained vigilant. I watched as Victoria began barking orders at the servants I had hired to maintain the house. She spoke with such an arrogant tone, as if she had been the rightful owner of this mansion all along. Julian also began to look very comfortable sitting in the plush executive chair inside the private library, calling his business associates and talking about his new property investment as if it were the result of his own labor. Greed began to show its teeth faster than I expected. They hadn't even stayed a single night, yet they already began to treat me as a mere intermediary for this wealth. They didn't ask about my feelings or how I managed to handle all of this alone. All they cared about was how this mansion could elevate their social status in the eyes of the world. As night began to fall, we stood on the main balcony enjoying the city lights flickering in the distance. Victoria stood beside me, holding a glass of orange juice with the poise of a queen. "Alana," she said without looking at me, "tomorrow we must take care of the ownership papers for this house. As the head of the family, Julian should be the one to manage all assets to keep everything secure. You understand, don't you? It's for the good of us all." That sentence was the first strike. They wasted no time trying to seize what they thought was mine. I simply nodded slowly, giving them the false hope that would entangle them even further in this game. I wanted them to feel a deep sense of ownership over this house so that when the time comes for me to evict them, the pain would be 1,000 times worse than what I felt when they insulted me in that old house. This adventure has just begun. I have given them the key to a manufactured paradise, and now I only have to wait for them to dig the hole of their own destruction. My name is Ilana, and behind this 400 billion rupiah luxury, I am weaving a web of betrayal that will reveal the true nature of the people I call my family. The third day in this mansion served as proof that money can truly change a person's character in the blink of an eye. The peaceful atmosphere I usually enjoyed was gone, replaced by the sound of hurried footsteps and Victoria shouting as she ordered the staff around. This mansion has 10 staff members I hired for maintenance and service, but Victoria treated them as if they were her personal slaves. She began rearranging crystal flower vases worth hundreds of millions of rupiah and complained that the aromatherapy in the main hallway didn't match her supposedly high-class taste. I sat in the spacious dining room, watching Chloe busy unboxing dozens of shopping bags from world-renowned brands. Luxury couriers had been coming and going since morning. Chloe used a supplementary credit card linked to my secondary account to buy bags, shoes, and jewelry at prices that could buy a middle-class apartment. She didn't ask for permission, nor did she say thank you. To her, my wealth was a limitless access point she was entitled to enjoy as a sister-in-law. Julian himself began to show the most alarming change in attitude. He no longer went to his small office. Instead of working, he spent the entire day in the cigar lounge, inviting several old business associates who had once looked down on him. I happened to pass by the room and heard Julian confidently claiming that this mansion was the result of his secret real estate expansion. He didn't mention my name at all. In front of his friends, he positioned himself as a genius entrepreneur at the peak of his success. "Alana, come here for a second," Victoria called as I was heading to the kitchen. She stood in front of a large mirror in the living area trying on a diamond necklace that had just arrived. I approached with calm steps, What is it, mother? I asked. Victoria didn't look at me. She remained focused on her reflection. I feel the decor in the master bedroom is too minimalist. I want you to call the best interior designer to replace all the furniture with a classic European style. I've made a list of items to be replaced and make sure everything is finished within this week because I want to host a tea party for my socialite friends. I stared at the list she handed over. The cost she proposed reached billions of rupiah for just one room. Mother, isn't the current furniture already very expensive and high quality? I asked, testing her reaction. Victoria turned, her gaze suddenly sharp and cold. Money isn't an issue for you now, is it? Don't be stingy just because you feel you own this house. Remember, you are part of the Harrison family. This family's reputation is far more important than mere numbers in your bank account. Besides, a mansion this grand will look cheap if it isn't decorated with the right taste. That sentence made me realize that, in Victoria's mind, I remained an outsider who functioned only as a source of funds. She was starting to feel more entitled to this mansion than I was. Greed had erased the hesitation she showed on the first day we arrived. Now, she felt she had full authority to manage every inch of this 400 billion rupiah building. In the afternoon, Julian met me on the balcony. He brought a bottle of expensive wine and 2 crystal glasses. For a moment, he looked like a caring husband. He poured the drink and handed it to me while putting his arm around my shoulder. However, I knew there was another motive behind this sudden kindness. Alana, I'm thinking about our future, he said while staring at the horizon. This house is very large and the tax management must be very complicated. I've spoken with my lawyer. He suggested that ownership of this asset be transferred to a new family company I will form. This is for the security of our assets in case your business ever faces legal trouble. You know yourself, the investment world is very risky. I sipped my drink slowly. You wanted to change the owner's name on the deed to yours, Julian? I asked with an innocent tone. Julian smiled, the manipulative kind that used to make me yield. Not just my name but in the family's name. This will make our position in the business world very strong. I can get larger capital loans to develop our new projects. Isn't that what you want? To see your husband successful and respected? I saw how he was trying to use my love to seize assets whose true status he didn't even know. He thought I was stupid enough to hand everything over just for validation from him. At this point, my heart felt very cold. The remaining affection for him began to evaporate, replaced by a firm resolve to finish this experiment. That night, the 3 of them held a lavish dinner without discussing the menu or the guest list with me. They sat at the long dining table, laughing loudly, and discussing future plans that didn't involve me at all except as a source of money. Chloe was busy showing off her social media followers, which has spiked due to her luxury content in the mansion. Victoria continued to brag about how great she was at managing the servants. And Julian was busy calculating how much profit he could get if he managed to take control of the house. I stood behind a dining room pillar, watching them from the shadows. They looked like a pack of predators feasting on a catch that wasn't theirs. They forgot that this place was just a temporary stage. They forgot that the comfort they felt right now was merely a lease that I could terminate at any time. Every arrogant word that left their mouths, every harsh command Victoria gave to the staff, and every lie Julian spun, I recorded them all in my mind. They thought they were heading toward the peak of life, when in fact they were walking toward the edge of a very deep abyss. I would let them enjoy this beautiful dream a little longer. I wanted them to feel very high, so that when they fall later, they will never be able to get back up. The tension inside the mansion began to feel real when I decided to set the first boundary. That morning, I called the household manager and instructed that the west wing, which housed my private office and valuable art collection, be locked to everyone but myself. I also restricted the use of the supplementary credit card held by Chloe after seeing her luxury clothing shopping bills reach 2 billion rupiah in just 2 days. For me, this was part of the test to see how they would react when their limitless access was slightly withdrawn. The reaction came much faster and harsher than I had anticipated. Victoria met me in the living room while I was reading a financial report. Her face was flushed with rage, and she threw the designer bag she had just bought onto the marble table. She felt humiliated because when she tried to pay for a beauty treatment at her regular salon, the card was declined. She considered it a massive insult in front of her socialite friends who were there with her. "Alana, what is the meaning of this?" Victoria screamed, ignoring the servants passing by. "Why can't my card be used? Do you want to embarrass me in public? Don't forget, without the Harrison family name, you would never be able to enter high society circles, even if you have this much money." I closed the tablet in my hand and looked at her calmly. "Mother, the spending over the last 2 days has exceeded reasonable limits. We must remain wise in managing funds. This house alone requires enormous operating costs every day. I am simply ensuring that our cash flow remains stable." "Wise?" Victoria laughed sarcastically, a laugh full of condescension. "You talk about being wise while living in a house worth 400 billion rupiah. Don't act like a poor person here. You have an obligation to maintain our standard of living now. If you couldn't afford to finance this family's lifestyle, you shouldn't have moved us here in the first place." Her attitude of feeling so entitled to my wealth truly sickened me. She seemed to have forgotten that just a week ago, she was still complaining about the rising price of eggs at the traditional market near her old house. Now, she felt that salon treatments worth tens of millions of rupiah were a basic human right that I had to fulfill without question. Not long after, Julian walked into the room with wide strides. He looked like he had just finished a phone call, and the expression on his face was very unfriendly. He did not defend his wife. Instead, he stood beside his mother, strengthening Victoria's position in pressuring me. Julian felt that my control over the finances was a form of distrust toward his capability as a husband. "Alana, mother is right. You can't just cut off financial access like that," Julian said in a commanding tone. "I am negotiating a major business contract with several investors. They see our lifestyle as a guarantee of success. If you limit Chloe's and mother's spending, it will ruin the image I am building. Just hand over the financial management to me. As your husband, I understand much better how to move money so we continue to look influential in the eyes of the public." I looked at Julian, searching for any trace of the man who had once promised to protect me no matter what. But all I saw was a man blinded by the shimmer of luxury. He no longer cared about honesty or hard work. All he cared about was maintaining this facade of wealth, even if it meant forcibly seizing his own wife's property. The conflict escalated further when Chloe came downstairs with puffy eyes. She complained that she couldn't enter the art collection room in the West Wing to take aesthetic photos for her social media content. She felt the area should be open to her because she was part of the family. To her, every corner of this mansion was property she could exploit for followers and validation from the virtual world. "This is a family home, Alana. Not your private office," Chloe shouted while stomping her feet. "Why do you have to lock certain rooms? What are you hiding in there? Are you keeping dirty secrets behind all this luxury?" Chloe's accusations began to grow wild. The three of them seemed to be ganging up to corner me in the house that I paid for myself. They started creating a narrative that I was an outsider trying to control their lives with money. Ironically, they hated my control so much, yet they couldn't give up even a bit of the comfort I provided. They wanted the money, but they didn't want the owner to set rules. "If you don't agree with the rules in this house, you always have the option to go back to the old house," I said in a cold voice that instantly turned the room silent. Victoria gasped as if I had just slapped her face. Julian stared at me in disbelief, while Chloe could only gape. They didn't expect that I, the usually submissive and quiet Alana, would dare to give an ultimatum like that. For a few seconds, their egos were hit hard. However, their greed was much stronger than their pride. Returning to the cramped and hot old house was a nightmare they didn't want to experience again after tasting the softness of a mattress worth hundreds of millions of rupiah in this mansion. "Do you dare to threaten us, Elena?" Julian approached, his voice lowering but full of threat. Don't forget, legally I am your husband. Whatever you own is mine as well. If you want to play hard, I can do things far worse than just asking for money. Julian's statement was a clear declaration of war to me. He openly stated his intention to seize my assets through legal channels or other manipulative means. I realized that this test had reached the stage where their masks were completely off. There was no more pretense of love or care. There was only a struggle for power over a property they thought would be theirs forever. That night, I saw the three of them whispering in the dining room without involving me. I knew they were planning something, perhaps contacting a lawyer or looking for a loophole to bring me down. I could only smile thinly from the darkness of the hallway. They were planning a way to evict me from this rented house so they could control it entirely. They didn't realize they were planning the way to evict themselves into absolute destruction. The atmosphere inside the mansion has felt entirely different since that massive argument in the living room yesterday. There are no more blatant shouts or open insults from Victoria or Chloe. Instead, the mood has turned into a haunting silence, the kind of stillness that usually precedes a major storm. The three of them have started acting incredibly sweet toward me, a sudden shift so abrupt that it feels completely unnatural. Julian even brought me breakfast in bed, something he hasn't done once in our 5 years of marriage. However, I know this isn't because they are remorseful. It's because they are executing a new tactic. I began to notice that Julian spends a lot of time in his private study with a stranger he introduced as a financial consultant. However, based on my observations through the hidden security cameras installed throughout the mansion, the man is actually a lawyer specializing in family law, known for being quite cunning in handling asset division cases. They often discuss late into the night while examining piles of documents. I know they are looking for a loophole to prove that I am mentally unfit to manage assets of this scale or trying to find evidence that the funds I used to rent this mansion came from an illegal source. Greed has brought them to a point where they no longer want a monthly allowance from me. They want the entire throne. Victoria has started inviting her close friends to the mansion whenever I'm not home. From the voice recordings I've obtained, she proudly brags that I am merely a name on paper, while full control of this wealth remains in her son's hands. She has even started planning to repurpose several rooms in the West Wing into her private gallery, despite my ban on anyone entering that area. The height of my suspicion was confirmed when I found a hidden folder in Julian's desk drawer. Inside was a draft of a statement declaring that I voluntarily surrender all authority over property and financial assets to Julian Harrison as my legal guardian. They had even prepared a forged signature that looked remarkably like mine. Apparently, they planned to make me appear as if I am suffering from severe depression or an anxiety disorder, rendering me incapable of making logical decisions. It is a form of betrayal colder than anything I could have imagined from people I consider family. One afternoon, I intentionally left my laptop open in the living room with a fake document displaying ownership details of the mansion. From a distance, I saw Chloe creeping toward the table. She immediately took photos of my laptop screen with her phone and ran toward her mother's room. I could imagine how thrilled they were seeing that document, thinking they had found the key to locking my fate forever. They didn't realize that every piece of information they gathered was bait I had deliberately set. Julian later met me in the backyard as the sun began to set. He tried to act romantic, holding my hand while talking about the future and the possibility of having children. To me, his words sounded like poison wrapped in honey. He was trying to lull my feelings so I would lower my guard. He even suggested we hold a grand celebration party next month to inaugurate our move, which he said should involve signing a few family documents in front of a notary as a mere formality. Alana, I just want to ensure that if anything happens to you, I can protect you and this house, Julian said in the softest voice he could muster. The outside world is very cruel. Many people will try to take advantage of your wealth. If all these assets are under a strong legal umbrella in my name, no one will dare touch you. I looked deep into his eyes, searching for a trace of honesty, but all I found was the reflection of his dark ambition. I appreciate your concern, Julian. Just give the documents to me. I'll look over them first, I replied with a fake smile as strong as his own. That night, I heard the three of them celebrating in the dining room downstairs. The clinking of crystal glasses and Victoria's triumphant laughter echoed all the way to the top floor. They think I've walked into their trap. They believe that in a short time, the Alana they consider weak will be cast aside, and this 400 billion rupiah mansion will belong entirely to the Harrison family. They've even started dividing up who will get which luxury car and who will manage each floor of the house. Their greed has truly reached its peak. They are impatient to evict me. I can feel that the execution date for their plan is very near. Every time we pass each other in the hallway, Chloe looks at me with a gaze of victory she can hardly hide. It is as if she is looking at someone who no longer has a future in this house. That morning, the atmosphere in the mansion was incredibly tense, despite the sun shining brightly through the large windows. I could sense that today was the day the Harrison family had chosen to launch an open attack. Julian was no longer acting sweet like the days before. He sat at the main dining table with a stack of files in front of him, accompanied by a man he referred to as the family lawyer. Victoria stood beside him with her arms crossed, staring at me as if I were a defendant awaiting a death sentence. The conflict erupted when I refused to sign the asset transfer documents they shoved in front of me at the dining table. Julian slammed his pen onto the table, creating a thud that echoed through the high-ceilinged room. His usually calm face was now flushed with a rage he could no longer hide. He felt that his patience in pretending to be kind for the past week had run out. Alana, do not be stubborn, Julian barked in a booming voice. We already know everything. We have seen your financial documents. You do not have the capacity to manage wealth this vast. You are just a lucky illustrator who happened to get investment funds, but you do not have the blood of an entrepreneur. Hand this house over to me now, or I will make sure you leave here with nothing. Victoria stepped forward, her face leaning close to mine with a gaze full of hatred. Do you think we are stupid? We have consulted with legal experts. As your husband, Julian has full rights over assets acquired during the marriage. You have hidden this wealth from your husband, and that is a form of fraud. We could report you to the police right now, but we are still kind enough to give you a chance to withdraw gracefully. I just sat there in silence, looking at them one by one with a calmness that only made them more furious. Chloe, standing behind her mother, chimed in with a highly condescending tone. She was carrying a small suitcase that I recognized as mine. She had ransacked my closet and packed my personal belongings unilaterally. Your cheap clothes do not belong in the closets of this mansion, Alana. Chloe mocked as she threw the suitcase onto the marble floor until it burst open. We have already replaced everything in the closet with a new designer collection. Your place is not here. You are just a mistake in the Harrison family history that we must immediately erase. Their accusations began to turn toward more personal matters. They slandered me, claiming I had obtained the money to rent this mansion in a dishonorable way. Julian even dared to accuse me of having an affair with the original owner of the property just to gain access. They used these lies as a primary weapon to corner me mentally. They wanted me to feel so filthy and low that I would surrender everything just to make them stop insulting me. The situation escalated when I tried to stand up to go to my room. Julian grabbed my arm roughly, forcing me back into the seat. For the first time, I saw physical aggression being used in their ambition to seize wealth. There was no more respect, no more affection. All that remained were three strangers whose eyes saw only numbers and luxury. Sign this paper, Elena. Julian shouted directly in my face. If you sign it, I will give you a severance package enough to live in a small apartment for a few years. But if you refuse, I will divorce you, sue for all these assets, and ensure your name is ruined throughout the entire property industry. You will never be able to work in this city again. I pulled my arm back with a sharp jerk and stood up straight. I looked Julian directly in the eyes, making him flinch slightly at the sight of my gaze, which showed not a hint of fear. "You all have truly lost your minds because of this house," I said in a low but sharp voice. "You do not care about the truth. You only care about what you can take from me." Victoria laughed with a shrill voice. "Care? We have cared enough for you for 5 years by letting you stay in our home. Now is the time for you to repay the favor. This house belongs to the Harrison family now. We have invited reporters and Julian's business associates for a party tonight to officially inaugurate the new ownership. You have until this afternoon to vacate the guest room you've been occupying. We do not want our guests to see someone like you wandering around here." They were openly planning to evict me from the property I rented with my own money. They felt that through intimidation and slander, they could win everything. The lawyer sitting beside Julian remained silent, occasionally smiling slyly while adjusting his glasses. He knew his client was taking illegal action, but he seemed to have been paid well to turn a blind eye. Throughout the afternoon, I was confined to the library while they prepared for the grand party. I could hear music starting to play downstairs, and Victoria's laughter as she welcomed her first guests. They acted as if I were no longer there. They celebrated a victory they stole through coercion and lies. The night of the eviction was almost here, and I was ready to close the curtain on this Harrison family stage play in the most dramatic way possible. I would let them feel like the owners of the world for the next few hours before a bitter reality hit them right in the face. That night, the mansion I rented became the center of attention for the city's elite. Hundreds of decorative lights illuminated the front lawn, and the strains of classical music welcomed guests arriving in luxury cars. Victoria, wearing a very expensive purple silk gown, stood near the grand staircase holding a glass of champagne, greeting everyone with the arrogance of a queen. Amidst the hustle and bustle, not a single soul noticed my presence. I stood on the second-floor balcony, watching how the Harrison family shamelessly claimed this 400 billion rupiah property as their own. Around 9 o'clock in the evening, Julian stood in the middle of the great hall and asked for everyone's attention. He looked incredibly confident in a custom-tailored black suit. He began to give a speech about the success of his real estate business and how this house was a symbol of the Harrison family's new era of glory. Victoria and Chloe stood by his side, smiling broadly while looking down at anyone they deemed beneath their class. In the eyes of the guests, they were the portrait of a perfect wealthy family. However, their moment of victory turned into an execution stage for me when Julian pointed toward me as I was descending the stairs. He did not call me with affection, but with a cold tone intended to humiliate me in public. He announced to all the guests that tonight was not just a housewarming party, but also a farewell party for his wife, whom he accused of domestic dishonesty. "Alana, please step forward," Julian said, his voice amplified by the loudspeakers. "I want all my business associates to know that the Harrison family does not tolerate betrayal. You have tried to take control of this family's assets illegally, and tonight, in the presence of these honorable witnesses, I officially divorce you and ask you to leave this property immediately." The hall suddenly fell silent. Whispers began to ripple through the guests. Victoria stepped forward and threw my small suitcase packed earlier that afternoon into the middle of the marble floor. Her shrill voice echoed clearly throughout the room. "Get out of here, Elena. You don't deserve to set foot on a floor this expensive. Go back to your miserable life and never try to approach my son again." I looked at them one by one with a deadly calmness. There were no tears, no pleas for mercy. Instead, I walked slowly toward the center of the room. Passing through the crowd of guests who stared at me with looks of contempt, I stood right in front of Julian, whose face showed satisfaction because he felt he had successfully taken me down. "You want me to leave?" I asked in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Fine, I will leave tonight. But before I walk out that door, there is one thing you must understand very well." Julian laughed dismissively. "What else do you want to say? A new lie? Save it for your lawyer in court later. Now, security, please take this woman out of here." 2 security guards hired by Julian approached me. However, before they could touch me, I raised my hand and pulled a document out of the small bag I was carrying. I placed it on the gold table next to Julian. I will not fight. I will leave voluntarily. However, you should know that this house you are so proud of does not belong to the Harrison family. And the document on that table is proof that your stay here will end much sooner than you can imagine. Chloe burst into laughter from behind. Still bluffing even after being kicked out. Julian has already checked all the documents, you liar. I only gave a thin smile and began walking toward the main entrance. When I reached the threshold, I turned back. Rain had begun to pour heavily outside, creating a highly dramatic atmosphere. Lightning occasionally flashed, illuminating my face, which remained calm amidst the storm. Julian, Victoria, and Chloe, I called out for the last time. You have thrown away a diamond for a lump of dirt. You are evicting me from this rented house because you think you have conquered it. But mark my words, tomorrow morning you will realize that it wasn't I who lost a home, but you who have lost the only person who has been keeping you from ruin all this time. With those words, I stepped out into the pouring rain. I did not use an umbrella. I let my body get soaked as I walked toward the black car waiting for me at the front gate. Behind me, I could hear Victoria's laughter breaking out, celebrating my eviction as if they had just won the biggest lottery in their lives. They slammed the mansion's massive doors shut with a loud bang, as if locking my existence away in their past. Inside the car, my personal assistant had already prepared a warm towel and a tablet. Everything is ready, Miss Alana? He asked respectfully. I nodded while drying my hair. Yes. Contact the original owner of this mansion. Tell them my lease ends tonight, due to a breach of commitment by the occupying family. Withdraw all deposits and freeze all supplementary credit cards linked to that account. I want them to wake up tomorrow morning to the bitterest reality. I stared at the still brightly lit mansion from a distance. They thought they had successfully seized the throne when they were merely celebrating their last night in a collapsing sandcastle. My name is Alana, and this eviction is the best gift they have ever given me, because starting tomorrow I no longer have to pretend to be part of that rotten family. That night, under the drenching rain, I left Bel Air for my true private property, a place far more luxurious that they never even knew existed. The game was over for them, though they didn't realize it yet. Tomorrow morning, when dawn breaks, this comedy will turn into a tragedy for the Harrison family. The first morning without my presence in that mansion was supposed to be the happiest moment for the Harrison family. However, reality struck them before the sun was even high in the sky. Victoria woke up in an exceptionally good mood, imagining the lavish breakfast that would be served by the staff on the balcony overlooking the sea. Wearing her new silk robe, she stepped down toward the main dining room, but her footsteps halted when she saw the house in total silence. There was no aroma of coffee, and no servants busy setting the table. A small panic began to set in when Victoria found the kitchen empty and clean, as if there had never been any activity there. She immediately called Julian and Chloe. The three of them stood in the center of the grand hall, trying to understand why all the household staff I had hired had disappeared without a word. Julian tried to contact the property manager, but his calls went unanswered. Amidst the confusion, a loud pounding echoed from the magnificent teak main door. Julian opened the door with an annoyed expression, thinking it was one of the late luxury couriers. However, standing at the door were 5 men in stiff black suits, accompanied by 2 police officers in full uniform. One of the men, who appeared to be the group leader, pulled out a dark brown leather folder and presented an official document bearing a legal seal. Mr. Julian Harrison? The man asked coldly. We are from the international asset management firm that manages this property. We have come to execute an immediate vacancy of this mansion. Julian laughed, a forced laugh to mask the fear starting to rise within him. You must be joking. This is my wife's house, and we are the legal owners. I just held a massive party here last night. Please leave before I report you for trespassing on private property. The man did not budge. He handed a copy of the document to Julian. "Sir, you seem to be mistaken. This property was never sold to anyone. This mansion was leased on a monthly basis by Miss Ilana Vance through an intermediary company. That lease was unilaterally terminated by the original tenant as of 12 midnight last night. The deposit has been withdrawn, and the contract is declared ended due to a violation of asset usage." Julian's face turned deathly pale. Victoria, standing behind him, snatched the document with trembling hands. She read every line of the legal text stating that the mansion, worth 400 billion rupiah, was merely a rental property. The confidence she held the night before shattered instantly. A lease? Impossible. Alana says she bought this house. She had the keys and the access cards. Victoria screamed in a breaking voice. "Miss Ilana indeed had full access because she was the one paying the rent, madam," the officer explained again. "However, the orders we received this morning are very clear. All occupants not named in the original contract must vacate the premises within 30 minutes. We have prepared a team to assist in moving your belongings outside the gate." Chloe began to cry hysterically as she saw several officers enter the house and place seal labels on the luxury furniture inside. She tried to stop them from touching the expensive bags she had bought, but the officer firmly stated that all items purchased using funds linked to the lease account were in a disputed status and must remain on site for further investigation. The Harrison family, who last night felt like the rulers of the world, were now forced out of the mansion with only the clothes they were wearing and a few personal bags they managed to save. They stood on the side of the road, outside the massive iron gates that were now locked tight against them. The luxury car Julian used to show off last night had also been towed away by the rental company because the automatic payment had been cancelled. Julian stood frozen, staring at the gate he had been so proud of yesterday. He tried to call my office, but my assistant gave an even more painful answer. Ilana Vance had resigned from her position as an illustrator and had disappeared without a trace. All of Julian's communication access had been permanently blocked. He finally realized that the victory he celebrated last night was merely a stage I had deliberately built so he could bring himself down. Their greed had caused them to lose their old home, which, though simple, was at least their own. Their old house had actually been sold hastily by Victoria 2 days ago to cover her extravagant lifestyle while living in the mansion. Now, they truly had no home to return to. They stood on the sidewalk of that elite neighborhood, becoming a spectacle for the wealthy neighbors they had invited to the party just the night before. I watched the scene from behind the tinted glass of my car, parked a short distance away. I saw Victoria sitting on the asphalt, bewailing her fate which had changed drastically in a matter of hours. I saw Chloe frantically trying to call her socialite friends, but not a single one picked up after hearing the news of their eviction. And Julian could only hang his head, realizing that he had just thrown away the only woman who could have given him everything, all for the sake of a mirage. After being evicted from the mansion with nothing but their shattered pride, the Harrison family was forced to stay at a budget hotel on the outskirts of the city. Victoria complained incessantly about the musty smell of the sheets and the cramped room, while Chloe would not stop crying because every single one of her socialite friends had blocked her number. Julian, on the other hand, sat silently in the corner of the room with his old laptop. He was trying to figure out who Ilana Vance really was. Throughout 5 years of marriage, he felt he had known his wife inside out, but the events of that morning proved he had no idea who the woman he shared a bed with actually was. Julian's search began by tracking down the intermediary company that had leased the 400 billion rupiah mansion. He found a name, Vance Global Holdings. Initially, Julian thought it was just a typical investment firm, but the deeper he searched, the faster his heart raced. The company turned out to have assets across 5 continents and control nearly 40% of the real estate shares in the elite Bel Air area, including the mansion they had just been kicked out of. What nearly made Julian fall out of his chair was seeing the company's organizational structure. The name of the CEO and majority shareholder was Ilana Vance, mother, Chloe. "Look at this," Julian's voice sounded hoarse as he called out to his mother and sister. Victoria approached with an annoyed expression, but her face turned to shock when she saw Alana's photo on the laptop screen. It wasn't the Alana in the household clothes they were used to seeing. In the photo, Alana wore a highly elegant business suit, standing alongside world leaders at an international economic conference. Beneath the photo was a brief caption, "The wealthiest woman under 35, the mysterious financial architect." "This is impossible," Victoria whispered, her lips trembling. "The Alana we know is just a penniless orphan. How could she possibly own a company this massive?" Chloe snatched the laptop with shaking hands. "So, all this time we've been insulting a billionaire. We treated her like a servant while she could buy our entire lives if she wanted to." Fear had now replaced greed on Chloe's face. She realized how foolish they had been to throw away a gold mine for a fleeting illusion of power. Julian immediately realized the magnitude of the mistake they had made. He recalled everything Alana said before she left into the drenching rain. Alana had never lied to them about the house. She had indeed been testing them. And they had failed completely. Julian tried to go to the headquarters of Vance Global Holdings, located in a skyscraper downtown. He hoped to meet Alana, beg for forgiveness, and convince her that the eviction was merely a misunderstanding triggered by his mother's pressure. However, upon arriving at the magnificent building's lobby, Julian couldn't even get past the reception desk. A burly security guard immediately blocked his path. "Mr. Harrison, you have been blacklisted from this company," the guard said in a firm voice. "If you attempt to approach this area again, we will not hesitate to take legal action as instructed by the owner." Julian shouted in the lobby, trying to call out Alana's name, hoping his wife was there and could see him. He became a spectacle for many a man in rumpled clothes looking pathetic in the middle of a luxurious lobby. Shortly after, a middle-aged man, who was Alana's personal lawyer, stepped out of the elevator and approached Julian. He handed over a thick envelope containing final documents. "Mr. Harrison, Ms. Alana expected you to come," the lawyer said expressionlessly. "Inside you will find signed divorce papers as well as a lawsuit for defamation." And now she was using that information to destroy them without even getting her hands dirty. Back at the hotel, Julian found Victoria arguing with the hotel staff because they couldn't pay for the next night's stay. All their bank accounts had been frozen as part of a money laundering investigation filed by Alana's legal team. They were now truly homeless in the city they once considered their playground. "We have to find Alana. She has to be held responsible," Victoria screamed hysterically. She still couldn't accept that the daughter-in-law she used to trample upon now held total control over their lives. Julian could only laugh bitterly while sitting on the dirty hotel floor. "She has shown us who she really is, Mother. She owns this world, and we are just insects who foolishly try to bite her foot. She is never coming back. She is done with us." 1 month has passed since the night of the eviction from the mansion, and the lives of the Harrison family have turned into a never-ending nightmare. They now live in a cramped apartment in a slum-like densely populated area. There are no more servants, no more designer clothes, and no more gourmet meals. Victoria was forced to sell her remaining imitation jewelry just to buy canned food while Chloe started working as a waitress at a fast food coffee shop, a place where she often cries from exhaustion and the shame of encountering people she once knew. Julian is the most broken among the three. He lost his job after news of the alleged asset fraud spread throughout the business community. Every corporate door he approached remained tightly shut. The Harrison name has become toxic in the professional world. However, in the midst of this despair, an invitation arrived in their apartment's mailbox. It was an official invitation to attend the launch event of a new mega-block development project by Vance Global Holdings. Below the invitation was a small note in a handwriting Julian knew all too well. "Come if you want to end all of this." False hope began to grow in their hearts. Victoria was convinced that Alana must miss them and wanted to offer peace. Julian thought that perhaps Alana wanted to give him a position in the new company as an apology for destroying their lives. By borrowing money from neighbors for transportation and ironing their still presentable old clothes, they set off for the five-star hotel where the event was being held. Upon arrival, they were greeted by luxury far grander than the rented mansion. Thousands of fresh flowers decorated the hall, and giant screens displayed stunning futuristic architectural designs. The Harrisons stood in a corner, feeling utterly out of place among world-class diplomats and entrepreneurs. Their eyes kept searching for Alana until finally, the hall lights dimmed and grand music began to play. Alana appeared on the main stage. She wore an incredibly elegant white gown with genuine diamond jewelry that filled the room with shimmer. She looked completely different, far more authoritative and powerful than the Alana who used to cook in their kitchen. She gave a fluent speech about her business vision, and everyone in the room erupted in thunderous applause. After the speech ended, Alana stepped down from the stage and walked slowly toward where the Harrison family was standing. Julian tried to step forward with a forced smile. "Alana, you look amazing. We knew you would call us. Mother is very sorry, and so am I. We can talk about everything again, right?" Julian said with a trembling voice. Victoria also drew near, trying to hold Alana's hand with a sorrowful face. "Darling, forgive me. I just got caught up in the moment back then. We miss you so much at home. Our apartment is very small now. Maybe we could move into one of your new units here?" Alana did not answer immediately. She looked at them one by one with an icy stare, as if she were looking at insects trying to crawl up her shoes. She then signaled her assistant to bring over 3 black envelopes. Alana handed an envelope to each of them. "I didn't call you here to make peace," Alana said in a very calm yet sharp voice. "I called you here so you could see with your own eyes what you threw away. You evicted me from a rented house worth 400 billion rupiah because you felt you owned the world. Now, look around you. This project I am currently building is worth 20 trillion rupiah, and I am the sole owner." Chloe opened her envelope and her face suddenly turned pale. It didn't contain a check. Instead, it was a bill for damages and reimbursement for all the luxury goods she had purchased using Alana's corporate account without permission. The amount reached billions of rupiah. In Victoria's envelope were documents of the illegal transaction regarding the sale of the Harrisons' old house, which was now being processed by the police for involving forged documents. "You thought I was a weak person you could control with harsh words," Alana continued, stepping closer to Julian. "You tried to steal my assets with fake documents, Julian. You never loved me. You only loved the shadow of the wealth I possessed. Now, I have bought all of your family's remaining assets. You no longer have anything, not even your own reputation." Julian hung his head in defeat. He realized that Alana never intended to return. This meeting was the final humiliation Alana had prepared to close all the wounds they had inflicted over 5 years. Alana wanted them to see her success from their rock bottom, so they would know they could never reach her level again. "Enjoy your dinner tonight, for it is the last luxury meal you will ever experience," Alana said before turning to leave. "Tomorrow morning, my legal team will proceed with the asset seizure for your debts. Never try to see me again, because to the world, the Harrison family no longer exists." Security guards then escorted them out of the building in a humiliating manner in front of many important guests. Victoria cried hysterically, while Julian could only walk with a hollow stare. They finally realized that Alana had grown into a giant they could never reach. They had lost everything: love, fortune, and the future, all because of the greed that blinded them in that rented mansion. That morning, sunlight streamed through the large windows of my new office located on the top floor of the Vance Global Holdings building. From here, I could see the entire city skyline spread beneath my feet. However, the feeling that emerged was no longer an ambition to conquer the world, but a peace I had not felt in a long time. The social experiment I began in that 400 billion rupiah mansion had officially ended. All divorce documents were finalized, and my name was now completely clear of the burden of the Harrison family, who had hindered my steps for 5 years. I received the final report from my investigation team regarding the fate of Julian and his family. He tried to contact several old friends to borrow money, but his name had become so toxic in the business world that not a single person would pick up his calls. Victoria, the woman who once felt most powerful at the dining table, now had to live in a social care home because her mental health declined drastically after losing her social status. She was often seen muttering the names of the servants from the rented mansion, acting as if she still lived there. She could not accept the reality that her luxury life was merely a brief charade. She destroyed herself with her own greed. Meanwhile, Chloe was reported to have left town to avoid debt collectors pursuing her for the luxury goods she bought illegally. She lost everything, including her thousands of social media followers who turned to mock her after the Harrison family scandal was exposed to the public. I took a deep breath and closed the report folder. There was no resentment left in my heart. I realized that punishing them was not about imprisoning them, but about letting them live in poverty while watching my success from a distance. That is a much heavier punishment for people who only worship wealth. They must learn that a person's value is not determined by how grand a house they occupy, but by how sincere their heart is. In the afternoon, I decided to visit the mansion that served as the testing ground for the last time. The house was now empty because my lease had completely ended and the original owner planned to sell it. I stood in the grand hall where Julian evicted me that night. The atmosphere that was once full of fake laughter and classical music was now dead silent. I touched the cold marble banister and remembered how sad I felt back then. But now I was actually grateful for what happened that night. Without that eviction, I might still be trapped in a marriage full of pretense. A real estate agent approached me. He did not know who I really was because I arrived in casual clothes and without an escort. Beautiful house, isn't it? It is valued at 400 billion rupiah, but unfortunately, the history of the last tenant was a bit problematic, the agent said while trying to offer the unit. I gave a thin smile. This house is indeed beautiful, but its foundation was built on sand. It means nothing to have a palace this large if the people inside betray one another. The agent looked confused by my words, but I simply walked away toward my car parked outside the gate. My new life had begun. I decided to change the focus of my company. I had proven to myself that wealth can be a blessing or a curse, depending on whose hands the money is in. For the Harrison family, money was a poison that revealed the rot in their hearts. For me, money was a tool to seek truth and create change. My car continued to drive toward the vast horizon. Out there, I had many things to do.